And we're live.
Shalom, shalom, fam. What's yappening? It's your brother Sean Saya Harris from the Yap Gang. Uh, Welcome to the new kitchen, our new hibachi kitchen. Where we're going to be cooking up some scholastic meals for you brothers and sisters. The Yap Gang Scholarship YouTube channel. It's our newest channel. This channel is going to be dedicated to genetic scholarship and world genealogy. All right. Uh, Here on this channel, we'll be elucidating information that will connect West Africans to the Semitic Afro-Asiatic ancient peoples of Western Asia and the Levant, i.e., the Levant, and also to world jewelry. First, I want to give a shout out to all my family, my Yap Gang Scholastic family, Yeshua Ben Issachar, James Cassell, Elkin Barlow, Shari Anaya, Rule Ibn Haddad Smith, the Hebrew of Israel, Ivry, and my aunt, Taiwan Swain, the Orthodox Mall. Gang. Uh, so again, welcome. Uh, this is basically another part of the Yap Gangs franchise. Yeah, as you know, we have a few channels. Shari has a channel, Shari Anaya, the Hebrew of Israel, Genesis 49ers, as well as the Orthodox More channel. And now we have this latest edition, Yap Gang Scholarship channel. So basically, family, we came tonight. This is our first show, our premiere, and we're going to be discussing certain statements that bro or Dr. Damon Richardson had made uh, previously on Berean's channel concerning the Ashkenazi Jews and the Khazars. Also, he challenged everyone, to prove that Western or West African, uh, those who are descendants of West African of West Africa, could we prove that we are not indigenous to West Africa? So today we're going to touch on a few of those topics, or both of those topics, and try to elucidate some information for you guys. I know people have been waiting for us to get started. People has been waiting for this channel to actually do a premiere, and this seems like the best way to do it. Start off with Dr. Damon Richardson from the AU, or I'm sorry, the Urban Apologist, the EU. Urban,
UA.
you, sorry, yeah,
You good?
yeah, the Urban Apologist. So, all right, well, with that, with all that being said, we're gonna jump right into it. So I'm gonna throw it to my bro, the Orthodox War, and we're gonna get started with the presentation. Shalom, Mak.
Shalom, fam. Appreciate you, OG. So we're going to start off with illustrating the conversation between Damon Richardson and the Yap Gang on Facebook. In particular, his back and forth with James, the good brother James Cassell, and also highlighting the fact that Yeshub had offered to have the good brother Damon come on and have an unimpeded conversation to where he can just an unfettered presentation where he can just break down his talking points and what he was talking about, etc., and then thoroughly get into it, and then us have a chance to thoroughly respond, etc. So without further ado, I'm going to share screen, get into the conversation, and brother James, if you want to jump in and clarify anything whenever you want to, please feel free to do so. Um, I'm going to make this big.
Roger that.
Yes, sir. So, oh, I did it on the wrong one. Let's do it like this so everyone can see what's going on. So what we have here is we have Damon Richardson making a post on November the 10th. This was his challenge to um, what he calls the FBI, the fraudulent Black Israelites. Um, and so this was his first challenge. One, provide scientific based research that is peer reviewed that shows evidence to the contrary of the 2013 Wayne State University genetic study on Jews, published in Human Biology, the official publication of the American Association of Anthropological Genetics, under the title no evidence from genome-wide data of a Khazar origin for the Ashkenazi Jews, which found that Ashkenazi Jews have no detectable Khazar origins and derive their ancestry from Middle Eastern and European populations. In other words, research debunking this study. To be clear, family, Yap Gang does not take issue with this study. We do not try to prove that the Ashkenazi Jews have origin within Khazar Jews. That is not our position in any way, shape, or form. In fact, our position is that Ashkenazi Jews who are under the haplogroup E could potentially descend from Abraham, etc. But going forward, his second challenge was this, and this is the one we're going to be focusing on. Provide scientific-based research that is peer-reviewed that conclusively finds that West Africans are the descendants of common Jewish Israelite ancestors from whom they derive the majority of their DNA and ethnicity, rather than from the indigenous West African people groups, i.e. Congo, Western Bantu, Cameroon, Ghana, Nigeria, Mali, Senegal, and Ivory Coast. In other words, research supporting this claim. Now, to Damon, he's making a simple statement here, but there's a lot of nuance in this statement that we have to parse and that we take issue with, particularly this last part here, right? When it talks about Africans are the descendants of common Jewish ancestors from whom they derive the majority of their DNA and ethnicity, rather than from indigenous West African people groups, i.e. Congo, Western Bantu, Cameroon, Ghana, Nigeria, Mali, Senegal, and Ivory Coast, etc. So this suggests an isolated existence for our people in West Africa, and this is something we're trying to clarify 100%. And the good brother James instantaneously went in and try to go at that part. But real quick, I want to go into one more part of what Damon was talking about. He said, anything short of that, we have nothing to talk about, as no scripture can be pointed to that states or suggests in any way that West Africans are Hebrews, as we are already terribly familiar with your eisegetical interpretations and poor handling of scripture. And just so you understand how research works, the 2013 Wayne State study is the largest genetic study on Ashkenazi Jews and is the latest genetic research on the population. Nothing less than published peer-reviewed research and nothing older than 10 years. To boot, Israeli-French historian Shlomo Sand's 2008 book, The Invention of the Jewish People, and Arthur Kessler's 1976 book, The 13th Tribe, which also espoused the Khazar theory, are both debunked by this research and the consensus of historians. Hence, the notion that Ashkenazi Jews are fake Jews who converted to Judaism is a scientifically and historically false claim. So again, 100% to be clear, family, we are not trying to back the Khazar theory, and anything we're saying in this response is not an attempt to back the Khazar theory. We do not agree with that theory in any way, shape, or form. And as a matter of fact, when James starts his dialogue with Damon Richardson, he makes that part clear, of which here we go. He says, 1, I do not argue that all significant number of Jews are Khazars. Maybe a few, if that. 2, addressing his second point, my G drops a specific paper from a scientific journal and says, I'll point to this specific point about the common ancestral population prior to the diaspora. Also notice the charts which showed that African Americans specifically carry said heritage. We're going to get into those charts here in a little bit, but right now I'm just going to highlight the conversation. I couldn't see Damon's first response to what Brother James said, but I could see his second response. He said also, and I'm assuming this is the second response because it starts with also. Also, this research was done in 2010 and doesn't, as stated, debunk the 2013 study I presented or support the West African theory. So again, James was not providing this study to debunk the Wayne State study in any way, shape, or form. And he tried to make that clear, and we're making that clear here. And so, but at the same point in time, something needs to be addressed in the sense where Damon said that this 2010 paper doesn't debunk the 2013 paper. So what is said in the 2010 paper that we will be citing here is not debunked by anything in the 2013 paper, and has not been debunked yet. Whatever stated in the 2010 paper, scientists have not gone back on. They haven't said that this information is incorrect. And so Damon Richardson needs to understand that concept and understand the fallacious claim he's making here and saying that just because the paper's from 2010, it can't shed light on this topic here. Well, no. If the truth hasn't changed since 2010, if the facts haven't changed since 2010, they still stand. So in order for this paper not to stand as scientifically sound, there has to be something standing to debunk it, and there's nothing there. But going further with that, James replies to Damon here, says, now you're just trying to avoid that Jews had sub-Saharan ancestry, which is the point of this paper we're talking about, which makes you need to answer a question. Why is their DNA connected to African Americans directly found amongst all Jewish populations, according to this study? Legitimate question, not playing gotcha. Not playing gotcha. No one is saying, again, James is making it clear, no one is saying all West Africans, and I don't know a seriously well-studied Israelite or even one West Israelite who argues that. So that's a straw man. But you need to acknowledge those who are connected and descended from Israelites, not cast us off as a religious crusade of some sort, which is 100% the case here. Again, James is offering peer-reviewed scientific information and pointing out what he's talking about and clarifying, I'm not talking about the Khazars. I'm not shooting at them. I'm not talking about the Ashkenazis. I'm not talking about that. We're talking about West African Jewry and their we're talking about West African genetics amongst Jewish genetics. That's common amongst Jewish genetics. And Damon Richardson has yet to acknowledge that that's the point that James is trying to make. And here we go. So Damon says this: there's nothing to discuss unless you have the two evidence-based peer-reviewed research that the post calls for. This link doesn't debunk the Wayne State study, and it doesn't support the West African theory. African admixture refers to North and East Africans, i.e. Egyptian and Ethiopian populations, which were already new. Now, that's not correct according to the paper. And we'll get into that. I'll let Ibree and James break that down. But the populations that are sourced in the study are not limited to North and East Africa. James goes on to reply with this: so the article I presented is not peer reviewed? Yeah, you absolutely avoiding a clear answer, because James gave him a clear answer to his second challenge. No, now you argue Harvard Medical School is wrong. They're not peer reviewed. You didn't even check the link. You don't have to fake it to make it. Damon says this: James, reread the edit. You are not presenting what the challenge asks for. You can't present any study. The study has to do certain things, and this doesn't do either. I don't have time to have my time wasted. So Damon is not in any way, shape, or form wrestling with the information or the actual point that James is trying to make. And to be fair, he might not understand the point that James is trying to make. He might have assumed that James was like any other quote unquote so-called BHI trying to prove claims that we're not claiming. But again, I don't see that. I don't understand how, because James is being clear. He's like, I'm not calling out the Khazars, and we're not claiming all West Africans are Israelites. All right. Going forward, James clarifies. Again, I gave a peer-reviewed article which meets the requirements for question 2, specifically talking about question 2. Do not avoid that. Here it is again. The African people on the group are the Yoruba. Why did you just tell that blatant lie? We'll get into that in a little bit in terms of like the people groups, including the Yoruba that are in that study. He tags in the Hebrew of Israel and says, you see how this man tried to pass the African admixture to East Africa and Nile Valley Africans. Such dishonesty. Damon says this: James Cassell, you clearly didn't read the study. Here's the claim he's making. You clearly didn't read this study. Seriously, read the title and reread the article. It does not support either of what I requested. Now, this is where we're getting fallacious. It does not support either of what I requested. And this is where we got to ask Damon Richardson to be an honest actor here. James isn't citing his information to go out what you requested. He's citing the information to support the point he was trying to make, which never gets addressed by Damon Richardson in this post. But I'll read what he says. It does not support either of what I requested. And if you think it does, then the issue is, as I've stated repeatedly, you all don't understand research. The article is about African genes flowing into those populations, not Jewish or European genetics flowing into African genetics. Further, sub-Saharan Africa is prominent in this study. So this is a very glaring statement for me, because it doesn't seem that Damon Richardson understands the gravity of what he's actually saying, or the implications of what he's actually saying. But the good brother James goes ahead and points this out for him. And as we'll get into the study, Ibree and James will clarify that even further. You know what? I'm going to skip all this stuff because again, James just keeps trying to show other people and even Jewish publications talking about the peer review study that he's talking about, and again, it gets blown off again. Damon Richardson, he says this isn't a study and it isn't peer reviewed. Like I said, y'all are zealous and blind, unlearned, and biblically illiterate. Now, James isn't saying this is a study. He's saying this is people looking at the study. This is people looking at the study.
Wait. It's actually quoting people who did the study. You know what I mean? There's an article. Ford is a Jewish publication, and it's actually interviewing people who did the study, and they're talking about the study and identifying how it's possible that even sub-Saharan African DNA could be involved there. I mean, they even put out a postulation that Solomon could have got slaves from sub-Saharan Africa somehow when he was trading in Africa for gold.
But you weren't saying that this was a study in and of itself, correct?
No, not at all. It's just pretty much interviewing the people who did the study.
Yes, sir. And again, this is where Yeshub jumps in and says, I've sent an invitation to you to come on my channel and give a thorough presentation. You will be unabated and given the floor the entirety of the show. We still have yet to hear back from Damon Richardson on this topic and on this requested invitation. But this is where James, he's like, okay, I'm seeing what's going on. I'm gonna address this seriously still. He's like, I don't think Damon Richardson understands what he's even asking in question to. He's saying, prove they have more in common with ancestral Israelite population than indigenous West African. Let's break this down piece by piece. We know he's afraid to respond to direct objections and choose to try and negate science with his pride. Now, this is a charge that Damon gets quite often and whatnot. But the brother still goes and breaks down what the actual issues are. 3 major issues here, and I'll give evidence from peer review with each issue. Issue 1, again, people who live in West Africa today are not indigenous to West Africa. The indigenous peoples of West Africa are the Pygmy people. Let's see if he says this isn't peer reviewed too, and cites another study from Harvard, right? Goes on to explain. Issue 2, again, as I illustrated, what we call today West African DNA is part of the common ancestral population of the Israelites. One more time, because this has got to be understood. As I illustrated, what we call today West African DNA is part of the common ancestral population of the Israelites. This is the argument James keeps trying to make that Damon's not either recognizing, understanding, or responding to. Meaning from the inception of the nation circa 1400 BCE, leaving Egypt, West African DNA has been part of Israel. And again, cites information for what he's talking about. Moving into issue 3. The first solid archaeological evidence for Bantus in West Africa is around 1500 to 1000 BCE or 3500 to 3000 years ago, which again would not make them indigenous but pygmies. You really need to take these issues seriously if you are challenging the Israelite community. Damon Richardson, not run and cower when challenged, brother, bring this dude on your channel, etc. So again, brother James laid out information. He laid out his issues, and he laid out sources to back his issues and claims he was making and whatnot. And they weren't seriously addressed. And so we're going to take the time here to hopefully, I'm going to say like this, I'm hoping that Damon Richardson read the study that James was talking about and did not understand, and just maybe misunderstood something here or there. I'm going to try to give him the benefit of the doubt, and hopefully he just misunderstood something, right? Or misunderstood the point that James was trying to make, because James was definitely not trying to make the case that all West Africans are Jews, or that the Khazars are the origin of the Ashkenazi. He's making his case like right here again. West African DNA is part of the common ancestral population of the Israelites, and that's what needs to get addressed. So I'm going to stop sharing here, and I'm going to hand it over to Ibri. And real quick, James, is there anything I'm missing or anything you want to touch on with that?
I say you pretty much hit everything right on the head, because issue number 2 was the main point I was trying to make, but I don't think he, like you were pointing out, I don't think he really understood in question 2 what he was asking and the implications of that question. It had to be unpacked. And as I tried to unpack it, he just exited stage left, didn't want to talk anymore.
Right. Okay, Ibri, you got it. You want to share a screen? I got you, man.
Yeah, actually, What I want you to do, can you read question number 2 one more time? And I'll get my slide here. But read question number 2 so we can flow into this.
You got it.
Thank you.
Provide scientific-based research that is peer-reviewed that conclusively finds that West Africans are the descendants of common Jewish Israelite ancestors from whom they derive the majority of their DNA and ethnicity, rather than from the indigenous West African people groups, i.e. Congo, Western Bantu, Cameroon, Ghana, Nigeria, Mali, Senegal, and Ivory Coast. In other words, research supporting this claim. And just to be clear, fam, he didn't even list off people groups. He listed off countries. Clear about that, but let's go ahead and do it.
All right, so now you can share my screen. So let's actually, and by the way, if you hear that it's loud in the background, forgive me. But so this paper actually is a perfect paper that can answer his question. So it's titled "The History of African Gene Flow into Southern Europeans, Levantines, and Jews." And this is a peer-reviewed paper. You can see that it's from the National Library of Medicine. And you can also see the various geneticists that were a part of it, such as Muntasia and also the famous David Reich. He actually has a lot of good papers that came out even this year of 2022. But let's actually get into the paper. So it touches on African gene flow into Southern Europeans, Levantines, and Jews. Our focus is going to be on Jews. Now, we're going to read the abstract and then go to the meat of the paper. So the last 3 sentences of the abstract says, we also detect 3 to 5% of sub-Saharan African ancestry in all 8 of the diverse Jewish populations that we analyzed. For the Jewish admixture, we obtain an average estimated date of about 72 generations. This may reflect descent of these groups from a common ancestral population that had already had some African ancestry prior to the diaspora. So let's sort of break this down. So 3 to 5% of sub-Saharan African ancestry is in all 8 of the diverse Jewish populations, and it goes back 72 generations, and it's a common ancestral population that had already had some African ancestry prior to the Jewish diaspora. So let's actually dig deeper into this. Let's go to the actual section that talks about the Jews. And so if you follow along to the discussion part of the paper, go to paragraph 3 and let's start reading it. So it says, a striking finding from our study is the consistent detection of 3 to 5% sub-Saharan African ancestry in the 8 diverse Jewish groups we studied: Ashkenazis from Northern Europe, Sephardis from Italy, Turkey, and Greece, and Mizrahis from Syria, Iran, and Iraq. These are the populations. So now let's get into the time period in which all this admixture is taking place. So it says, we estimate that the average date of the admixtures of 72 generations, 2,000 years, assuming 29 years per generation, is older than that in Southern Europeans or other Levantines. So basically, it's saying that Jews have sub-Saharan African DNA older than Southern Europeans and Levantines. So let's keep reading. So it says, the point estimates overall 8 populations are between 1,600 and 3,400 years ago, but with largely overlapping confidence intervals. It is
Hey, Avery, let me point this out real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
3,400 years ago is the inception of the state of Israel itself, about
It's true.
1400 BCE.
Yeah, 3,400 years ago would put us in the time period of the late Bronze Age collapse / early Iron Age. So this is Israel is in the nation. They are in the Levant in this time, as James said. So it says, it is intriguing that the Mizrahi, Iraqi, and Iranian Jews, who are thought to descend at least in part from Jews who were exiled to Babylon about 2,600 years ago shared the signal of African admixture. Now, this is very powerful because most people will consider Mizrahi, Iranian, and Iraqi Jews to be the purest Jewish types because after the Assyrian Babylonian Empire, they were kind of stayed in the region. And so people will consider either the Mizrahi Jews as the purest and oldest Jewish communities, and they do have the oldest Jewish communities, or they'll say that it's the Yemenis. But focusing on the Mizrahis, basically the Babylonian Jews, they have the oldest communities and are considered the purest Jews. And even they have African DNA. And again, this is as far back as 2,600 years ago. So it says, a parsimonious explanation for these observations is that they reflect a history in which many of the Jewish groups descend from a common ancestral population, which was itself admixed with Africans prior to the beginning of the Jewish diaspora that occurred in the 8th and 6th century BC. Now, this is powerful because basically it's saying that before the Jews even went into the diaspora, the Assyrian diaspora and the Babylonian diaspora, before the diasporas occurred, Jews already had this sub-Saharan African DNA. Now, you might be asking, what type of African DNA is this talking about? Well, go down to the I believe this is the 5th or 6th paragraph, and it actually tells you. And it says a potential issue that could, in theory, influence our finding is that the exact population contributing to African ancestry in West Eurasians is unknown. To gain insight into the African source populations, we carried out PCA analysis, which suggested that the African ancestry in West Eurasians is at least as closely related to East Africans' Luya, and if y'all look up the Luya, they are a Bantu people, as to the West African Nigerian Yoruba. If you don't mind, Moore, can you reread his statement for paragraph 2 and then come back to my paper?
You got it.
Just reread that really quick, and then we'll come right back to the paper, and I'll pull something else up.
You got it, sir. So again, question 2: provide scientific-based research that is peer-reviewed that conclusively finds that West Africans are the descendants of common Jewish Israelite ancestors from whom they derive the majority of their DNA and ethnicity, rather than from the indigenous West African people groups, i.e. Congo, Western Bantu, Cameroon, Ghana, Nigeria, Mali, Senegal, and Ivory Coast. In other words, research supporting this claim.
Thank you for that. So when it comes to the populations, it actually shows you in the charts when it comes to the African DNA, and African Americans have the most of it because it's West African DNA. There's no getting around this. They're using West African DNA when it comes to these populations. Now, what's interesting about this is that when it comes to the Iranian Jews and the Iraqi Jews, they have the oldest of this. So over here is the generations. It says estimated date of admixture generations. And right here it says 129 plus or minus 34. And then this says 153 plus or minus 22. Mm-hmm. And this is the Iranian Jews, just to show y'all me. Right there. This is the Iranian Jews, and this is the Iraqi Jews. Iranian Jews and Iraqi Jews have the oldest African DNA when it comes to all these Middle Eastern and Mediterranean groups. I believe the next oldest is the Syrian Jews. If you highlight right here, it says 99 generations plus or minus 23, Syrian. And then after that, it is the Sephardic Greek.
No, you're missing Northern Italy. It's pretty old.
Let me see. Yeah, the Italian right here. Oh, excuse me, the Northern Italy. Yeah, Northern Italy has 54, excuse me, plus or minus 27, and then you go to the Syrian Jews next, who have the oldest admixture, and then it's Sephardic Greek Jews, Sephardic Turkey Jews, which is Anatolia, and Italian Jews. They all have basically around the same amount of African admixture from 82 generations to 88 generations. So
they're basically showing you, I'm sorry, bro, but they're basically showing you here the same thing that was read out a little further up in the paragraph that the brother was reading, that during the Babylonian exile, around this time, we have the Iranian, we have the Iraqi, how many generations back this goes. So they're proving out just how far back this DNA goes, you know?
Exactly. And this is hitting head on what he wanted to know about uh, Jews and African Americans and Black people. And it would seem like the ancestors of the Jewish people and the ancestors of African Americans converged at some point 3,400 years ago in the Levant. Because there's no way for them to have this DNA if our ancestors weren't there. People don't just pop up and have DNA from ethnic groups. Like, I'm not just going to have a kid that's going to have Chinese genes out of nowhere. Like, the ancestors of both of our peoples came together and admixed.
Procreated. Yeah.
Yes,
To a significant
procreated.
extent, because it's
Exactly.
scattered everywhere as far as Jews are concerned.
exactly. In
Exactly.
all 8 diverse Jewish populations. Exactly. So just to push this point even further, I'm going to share another screen, but there's a paper that actually illustrates that that Bantu people and West and Central Africans actually have Levantine DNA. So I'm going to share this next screen. I believe this is it right here. Oh, excuse me, hold on. All right, share my screen. And this is another peer-reviewed paper, because that's all we do here at the Yap Gang. So this paper, once it comes up, all right. So this paper is titled Pleistocene North African Genomes Links Near Easterner and Sub-Saharan African Human Populations. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in the specific part of the paper that's relevant to us. So right here is an important piece that kind of connects some more things together, because if we're going to claim that we have Israelite ancestry, then it's probably important to illustrate that we have some type of Levantine ancestry. And it turns out we do. Again, from this paper, it says that a more recent link is the spread of Bronze Age Levant-like ancestry in sub-Saharan Africa, together with agriculture during the Bantu expansion. So let's break this down. So during the Bantu expansion, it seems like there was a introduction of Bronze Age Levant-like ancestry in sub-Saharan Africa, together with agriculture during the Bantu expansion. Because the Bantu people, if y'all don't know, they're really interesting people, because they had developed agriculture as well as ironworking. And as we know, agriculture likely comes from the Middle East. The Natufians, as an example, were technically the first farmers. And when it comes to metallurgy, that also developed in the Middle East. And it seems like when these Bantu people are coming into sub-Saharan Africa, they're bringing Levant-like genes in places like Western Central Africa, as well as iron and agriculture. And so what is this?
Shout out.
Go ahead.
Shout out EU 290 and the iron smelters.
Yep. And so what is this Levant, this Bronze Age Levant DNA? So Bell says it right here. It says the Bronze Age Levant gene pool has been proposed as a mixture of Neolithic Levant with individuals related to Caucasus hunter-gatherers and early Neolithic farmers from Iran and from Anatolia. Middle Eastern DNA.
Paternally, we're talking about haplogroup J and E1B1B, possibly some T and some R up in there, right?
Yes, we are.
Right.
And they have this type of DNA, Middle Eastern DNA, Levantine DNA. Bantu people have it. But that's not the only source that talks about
the Fulani got T in it too, don't it?
Oh yeah, Fulani 100%.
Yeah, exactly.
And it doesn't just end there. I'll pull up another paper that talks about West Central African people having Levant DNA, something that Damon Richardson says that apparently West and Central Africans don't have. So here's another paper. I just want to push this even further. This paper right here that I'm sharing is titled Reconstructing Prehistoric African Population Structure. If y'all can see that, share my screen.
Also, James, don't forget about the Chadic people in RV88, and that, you know,
Yeah, we
how
know
we
that was
see
in
it, they would have had to
Corsica.
come in. Yeah, they would have had to come in during the Bantu as well, the Bantu expansion, for that gene to flow into Africa.
And to point out two historical things, we do know that Herodotus speaks of how Nico II commissioned Hanno the Navigator to colonize the rest of Africa with the overflow that was coming from all the wars and stuff that was going on in the Levant. And we have the tale of Hanno the Navigator himself, which a lot of scientists believe that he actually went to West Africa and pretty much brought back a gorilla, and that's the things they were describing in the stories.
Mm-hmm. And so this paper right here goes deeper into that, goes into the fact that these West and Central Africans had this Levantine DNA. Again, this is a peer-reviewed paper titled Reconstructing Prehistoric African Population Structure. Here are all the scientists that were a part of it. Again, David Reich was a part of this as well. He's like one of the most head geneticists.
Yeah,
of our
he
time.
heads all of these, most of these papers in this field. He pretty much pioneered this field.
Mm-hmm. And so we're going to go to the relevant part of the paper, which talks about West and Central Africans having Levantine DNA, which for some reason people think is impossible, but it's not. So it is right here, I believe. Wait, hold on. As y'all can see, this is a very, very long paper, but here it is right here. So we're going to read from this section. So it says Tanzania. I'm not going to name all these African tribes, just going to name some of them. So Tanzania, Yoruba, Esan, Loyo, or Luyo, Bantu Kenya, just these various African groups. So it says, are all fitted as consistent with having 100% Mande-related Western African related ancestry. Basically, all these groups are related. Niger Congo people, Bantu people are all, basically related. And it says the Mandinka from the Western African coast are fitted as having 2.8% plus or minus 0.6% Levant Neolithic related ancestry, PPNB. So again, another source talking about how Western Central Africans do have Levant DNA, Levant Neolithic related ancestry. And so the last thing, or not the last thing, but another thing I want to point out is how it actually makes sense that there would be, let's say, E1B1A type peoples in the Levant, in that part of the world in that time. If most people take a DNA test, particularly those with E1B1A, can share my screen real quick. They will see that they're related to a man named Ramses III, who was the pharaoh of Egypt at the time. And it turns out that Ramses had E1B1A. And so it reads right here, it says, you and Ramses III share an ancient paternal line ancestor who probably lived in North Africa or Western Asia. Western Asia is the Middle East. So basically it's saying that, you and Ramses III have an ancient paternal ancestor. We share an ancestor who could have been in North Africa or in the Middle East. And this makes
Shout
a
out
lot.
EV38.
Right. Shout out EV38, because the E marker likely has its origin in the Middle East. I'll touch on that here in a second.
Yeah, and you always got to remember that North Africa, and especially the Levant, is the same biogeographical area, which means the same peoples, animals, fauna, everything live in that location.
All Afro-Asiatic populations. And so the oldest, as a matter of fact, the oldest E1B1A marker we have found in Africa is Ramses III, because he goes back to the late Bronze Age. And then we found an old E1B1A marker in Ethiopia, which is a place heavily populated by Afro-Asiatic speaking groups. So I'm going to share my next screen, which illustrates who the true West Africans are. Who is the oldest West African population? And the oldest West African population is actually Pygmy and Khoisan groups, basically A and B markers. I advise that y'all check out this paper, again, another peer-reviewed paper titled Ancient West African Foragers in the Context of African Population History. Here are all the, geneticists and scientists that are part of it. Again, David Reich. You can't get away from David Reich. So we're going to read the abstract of the paper. So it says, we generated genome-wide DNA data from 4 children buried roughly 8,000 and 3,000 years ago in the Shuma cave, in the Shumaluka, Cameroon, one of the earliest archaeological sites within the probable homeland of Bantu languages. One individual carried the deep divergent Y chromosome haplogroup A0, which is found today almost exclusively in the same region. However, all 4 individuals' genome-wide ancestry profiles are most similar to West Central African hunter-gatherers, implying that present-day populations in Western Cameroon, as well as Bantu speakers across the continent, are not descendant substantially from the population represented by the 4 people. So again, Bantu speakers, Bantu people are not related to these ancient West Central African hunter-gatherers. We're not related to these ancient Western African populations.
Right.
So
we did procreate with them though, because as the Bantus came into the area, we did take the women and have children. So you may find pygmy DNA if you are African American in your haplogroup E. You may find pygmy DNA.
African Americans typically have around, I would say, 1 to 5% of pygmy DNA. Yes. And y'all should read the rest of this.
I want to point out it says 3,000 years ago. That's 1,000
Right.
BCE that we're talking about, where they're not finding any evidence of the modern people in West Africa. Now, we got to ask ourselves, okay, what happens after that time period, which is something we constantly point to? All these wars in the Levant start going on, and people start migrating, and you start getting histories of, like with Nico II, commissioning the Phoenicians to circumnavigate and colonize West Africa, the rest of Africa.
Exactly. And so, yeah, the oldest populations in West Central Africa are A and B markers. Here's the chart. And as James said, this goes back from 8,000 years to 3,000 years. And it's L for the mitochondrial DNA, it's L0, L0A, and L1C. And for the Y DNA, it's B and it's A. Again, most African Americans are E1B1A. Well, excuse me, most Niger-Congo Bantu people are E1B1A. Let me put it that way. But so actually, now let's go to another part of what Damon typically says when it comes to his I guess his distaste for an idea of us coming from the Middle East rather than us originating in Western Central Africa. So now I want to go to the biblical narrative. I'm going to share my screen. According to the scriptures, there was a global flood, and everybody died in the global flood except for Noah and his children, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives. And according to the biblical narrative, the ark was supposed to have rested in the mountains of Ararat. And some people say this is in Armenia. Some people say this is near Mount Kuti in Syria. I personally believe it's Mount Kuti, but regardless, the ark rested in the Fertile Crescent in the Middle East. And I believe Damon is a Bible believer. And so I believe that he would say that, everybody descends from Adam and Eve, and then, man started to sin. Most High sent a flood to wipe out all of humanity except for Noah and his family. And then everybody got off the ark and then migrated about the world. So my question to Damon is, how do we, as African Americans or as West Central Africans or anybody, originate in Western Central Africa if the ark rested in the Fertile Crescent? Either you have to say that we're pre-Adamites or that we don't descend from Noah or something like that in order for us to have originated in Western Central Africa. And furthermore, you also have to believe in the evolutionary concept of the out of Africa theory, because basically, Damon, what you're saying is that when humans began to migrate out of Africa, our ancestors either just stayed in Africa and went west, but that doesn't make sense according to the biblical narrative. So my question to you, Damon, is: do you believe that we descend from Noah and that we got off the ark and we migrated to Western Central Africa, or did we somehow just pop up in Western Central Africa? I'd love to understand your stance on that, because I take the biblical approach that all of humanity today, current humans today, descend from Noah, and we all migrated to the parts of the world that we're at today. So that would mean that the ancestors of Western Central African peoples migrated to Western Central Africa, where they are today. The only question is, what time did they get there? So I would like to for you to answer that question.
Yeah, I gotta bag you up on that, because we know the lands that are outlined in Genesis 10 for the sons of Noah to spread out and spread their seed. So which land do our ancestors come from? It can't be West Africa, because that's not mentioned in there. There's the Nile Valley, you have the Middle East, and you have Europe. Which one is it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And so another thing I want to point out is what is haplogroup DE, which is the ancestral marker of E1B1A. And when it comes to haplogroup DE, it has its origin. Most geneticists would say that it has its origin in uh, in the Middle East, and that they would have came into Africa via basal Eurasians. So let's read this source right here. It says frequency of Y-DNA haplogroup E in modern populations and hypothetical migration routes from its ancestor clade DE in Southwest Asia, the Middle East. Haplogroup E arrived in Africa about 77,000 years ago and diversified in the Horn of Africa. It arrived together with specific West Eurasian alleles and later also diffused into various Paleo-African populations, as well as among ancient North Africans, which were in population indigenous to northern Africa and distinctly related or ancestral to modern West Eurasians. Haplogroup E and DE have an Middle Eastern origin. Again, people with E1B1A descend from haplogroup E and DE. And geneticists will say that haplogroup E and DE have a Middle Eastern origin. So we migrated from the Middle East into Western Central Africa. Haplogroup E migrated into Africa as part of a massive migration of basal Eurasians, ancestral West Eurasians, and then diffused and diversified within Africa, specifically the Horn of Africa, Northeast Africa. Haplogroup DE next to CF were the basal Eurasian lineages which expanded from the Middle East. The common ancestral haplogroup Y-DNA Adam is suggested to have originated somewhere in the Middle East or the Iranian Plateau. Massive Eurasian migration and following admixture created the many different African populations of today and are the reason for the high genetic diversity observed in sub-Saharan Africa. In other words, modern Africans, sub-Saharan Africans, formed from indigenous Paleo-African groups and intrusive Afro-Sans, basal Eurasians, and ancient North Africans. Finally, there is the fact why haplogroup E is dominant among non-hunter gatherers in Africa, and it is within the Eurasian clade DE. Again, haplogroup E is Eurasian. While indigenous African hunter gatherers belong to haplogroup A00, and B. So the more indigenous Africans would be haplogroup A00 and B, not E. And again, E1B1A descends from E. So, with that being said, we would actually postulate in the Yap gang group that Shem would be haplogroup E. And part of this is because of certain
DE.
ancient populations,
Yeah,
such
the
as,
para group,
yeah,
the para
paragroup,
group DE.
yeah, the
It
paragroup
would be
DE.
both. Yeah.
And the reason we say this is because of certain ancient populations, such as the Natufians. When it comes to the Natufians, it's believed that they are the ancestors of Semitic people. And the Natufians had haplogroup E. Let's read this. This is from the book In Hot Pursuit of Language and Prehistory, and it reads, this paper makes an additional inference since there is archaeological and physical anthropological reason to believe that the Natufians were related to modern Semitic speaking peoples of the Levant. Now, what haplogroup is the Natufians? The haplogroup of the Natufians is haplogroup E. This is from the paper Paleolithic DNA from the Caucasus Reveals Core of West Eurasian Ancestry, and it reads, such a scenario would also explain the presence of Y chromosome haplogroup E in the Natufians and Levantine farmers, a common link between the Levant and Africa. And as a matter of fact, it's believed that haplogroup E is really the founder of Afro-Asiatic peoples, but I'm not going to go too deep into that. I also actually I will go into that. I actually want to illustrate that the Proto-Afro-Asiatic language group and people would have had haplogroup E. But let's just reaffirm ourselves with the Natufians. This book, which is from Cambridge, says, given the modern distribution of Semitic languages over the area in question, which belong to the larger Afro-Asiatic family, it seems appropriate to suggest that these first farmers of the Levant and their Mesolithic predecessors, including the Natufian culture, were speaking a Proto-Afro-Asiatic language. It may be that Proto-Semitic continued to develop within the Levant and Syria area, since both Ebelite and Akkadian early Semitic languages are there attested early, the former around 2400 BC. And so just to show you the haplogroup that's believed to be Afro-Asiatic, this is again from a peer-reviewed paper, Y chromosome E haplogroups, their distribution and implication to the origin of Afro-Asiatic languages and pastoralism, it reads, the Proto-Afro-Asiatic group carrying the E-P mutation, by the way, haplogroup E1B1A descends from E-P2. So it says the Proto-Afro-Asiatic group carrying the E-P2 mutation may have appeared at this point in time and subsequently gave rise to the different major population groups, including
And
current speakers of the Afro-Asiatic languages and pastoralist populations. So the ancestors of Afro-Asiatic people would have carried haplogroup E. And it actually
right.
makes a lot of sense if you look
So
at,
real quick, Avery, make sure that everybody understands that EP2 is that E1B1A and E1B1B would come from EP2.
yes, EP2, also known as E1B1, is the father of E1B1A and E1B1B. And it actually makes a lot of sense that haplogroup E, that Afro-Asiatic people are haplogroup E, because if you look at a simple distribution map of Afro-Asiatic languages, it actually overlaps perfectly with haplogroup E. As a matter of fact, here's a chart showing everything together. Right here is the distribution of Natufian DNA. This is the distribution of haplogroup E, specifically E1B1B, and this is the distribution of Afro-Asiatic people or languages, and it all overlaps beautifully. Now, another thing I want to touch on before I end off is Dante Forson, because as he said in his video, he is quite literally the receipt, and Moore's going to touch on this as well. But Dante carries the haplogroup known as E-M34. Is that correct, Moore? E-M34.
He's EL29, so he's EM84. He's a subclade of EM34.
Okay, he's a downstream of it.
Yep.
Well, what's interesting about EM34 specifically, since just talking about that, one is that the Natufians carried EM34, which is Dante's ancestral haplogroup. It says, according to the genetic analysis done on 6 Natufian remains from northern Israel, the Natufians carried the Y DNA haplogroup E-Z830, a somewhat upland clade of E-M123, and therefore ancestral to it. The Natufians were one of the first settled peoples in the world and may have contributed to the domestication of certain crops and thus the advent of agriculture. The discovery of E-Z830 without other clades suggests an indigenous presence in Canaan and Israel that predates all other clades, which are not known to have existed in the region at the time, 10,000 years before present. E-M123 is thought to have a TMRCA. TMRCA means the most common recent ancestor, about 18,000 years ago, 8,000 years before the Natufian. Possibly ancestral remains are from. Haplogroup E1B1B2 has been found in 75% of the Angazelle population, along with 60% of PPNB, pre-pottery Neolithic B, populations circa 8,800 through 6,500 BC. And so just to explain why Dante having EM34 is extremely interesting is because EM34 is actually considered to be a haplogroup of proto-Semites. I'm going to try to find this, and then we'll end off here and go to more. And so let me just show this really quick. I'm going back out of here, go back here. But just as Dante said, he quite literally is the receipt because one, his haplogroup is part of the typical Afro-Asiatic haplogroups. And if you go to eupedia.com, titled haplogroup E1B1B, it says E-M34 is the main Middle Eastern variety of E1B1B and is thought to have arrived with the Proto-Semitic people in the late Copper to early Bronze Age. And this is important because the latest papers dealing with Semitic people say that Semites have a Levantine origin. This is from the paper Bayesian Phylogenetic Analysis of Semitic Languages, identifies an early Bronze Age origin of Semitic in the Near East. And it reads, we estimate that Semitic had an early Bronze Age origin, approximately 5,750 years before present, in the Levant, followed by an expansion of Akkadian into Mesopotamia. And a Semitic origin in the Levant is very important because, as we know, the Natufians have a Levantine origin or were in the Levant again. Such a scenario would also explain the presence of Y chromosome haplogroup E in the Natufians and Levantine farmers, a common link between the Levant and Africa. And again, the Natufians are the ancestors of Semites. This paper makes an additional inference since there is archaeological and physical anthropological reason to believe that the Natufians were related to modern Semitic-speaking peoples of the Levant. And again, E1B1A and E1B1B are both related. They are both brother clades. And E-P2 is believed to be the Proto-Afro-Asiatic haplogroup, meaning that both E1B1A and E1B1B fall under that Proto-Afro-Asiatic belt. And with that, I conclude.
If I may just say something real quick, I just want to do a quick review that we're directly answering this question as it pertains to West African ancestry being in connection with the ancient Israelites by giving him an article which directly states it, and by supporting it by showing a strong connection between West Africa and the Near East, as Ivry just went over by showing DNA connections and pretty much an ancient link between EP2, which is the pretty much foundation of Semitic speakers, and West Africans who descend from EP2.
Actually, I have one more thing I'm going to say before I end off. Also, I'm going to share my screen really quick. Sorry about that, More. I got one last thing I got to say. So, also, we don't like Moore said, we don't believe that Jews are the descendants of Khazars. We believe that Jews are descendants of Israelites, especially those with haplogroup E. And haplogroup E has the greatest chance of being the Israelite marker, not only because, like I said earlier, about it being Afro-Asiatic and Proto-Semitic, but when it comes to Dante's haplogroup and just Jewish people in general, Many geneticists would actually state that it is a Israelite marker, and that Jewish people carry haplogroup E as a founding haplogroup. For instance, if you go to Y-DNA haplogroup E, E1B1B and E1B1A, excuse me, sorry, it's blurred. It's going to clear up here. It says this haplogroup has a long presence in the Near East as well, as demonstrated by its occurrence in ancient remains in the Levant and mummies in Egypt. Today, a significant contingent of Ashkenazi, excuse me.
No, go ahead, bro. I'm sorry.
Oh my God. Of Ashkenazi 20% and Sephardi 30% Jews belong to a specific sub haplogroup E-M215, defined by mutation E-M123, supporting this as a major founding lineage of the Jewish people. Again, haplogroup E is a major founding lineage of the Jewish people. And 20% of Ashkenazi Jews and 30% of Sephardi Jews carry haplogroup E. So really, when you combine that 20% and that 30%, that's 50% of European Jewry with haplogroup E. When you think about it. And just to push this point even further, haplogroup E is seen as a haplogroup that is of Israelite origin. And I'm just going to read this one final quote, and then we'll end off here. Because I believe people need to understand this, that haplogroup E is definitely up there as a Israelite marker. And there are papers that literally discuss this. I'm going to see if this is it. All right, so I believe this one might be it. It says, in fact, the title of the paper, A Mosaic of People, the Jewish Story, and a Reassessment of the DNA Evidence. And it says, in fact, the best candidate for possibly E3B Israelite ancestry among Jews is E-M123. This subclade occurs in almost the same proportions, approximately 10 to 12%, among both Ashkenazim and Sephardim. According to Cruciani in 2004, E-M123 probably originated in the Middle East. It is found in large majority of the population from that area, and then back migrated to Ethiopia. Yet, again, another back migration with haplogroup E. Anyways, it says, yet the fact that both Sephardim and Ashkenazim possess this subclade in similar high frequency supports an Israelite / Middle Eastern origin. So we have no issue with Jewish people descending from Israelites, because many Jewish people have haplogroup E. And again, haplogroup E is seen as Afro-Asiatic and Proto-Semitic. We have nothing against the Jewish people. And by the way, even Jews who don't have haplogroup E, let's say that they have J, I'll also say they're descendants of Israelites, because Israelites were among various peoples. We know of the mixed multitude in the Exodus, and people joined the nation all the time.
So yeah, we amalgamated a lot of people that we were fighting around us. There's even 2 Canaanite nations that we made treaties with, which pretty much made them part of our nation. So we have to acknowledge the presence of outside DNA within the Proto-Semitic spectrum, I guess I'll say.
Mm-hmm. Also, is that the evidence points, you see them there. You see haplogroup J there during from the Bronze Age down. You see them involved with Israelite culture. So it's no denying that they were there. That's something we won't do.
Exactly. But now I'll give it over to I think Moore. Did you have something, or is that it?
Yeah, sir. I'm gonna quickly try to go through this so we can keep it under like an hour and a half for the family. But I'm going to share my screen and touch on Dante's DNA. And one of the reasons why I'm going to touch on it is because it just so happens that my maternal grandfather also has the same DNA that Dante has. And my maternal grandfather descends from North African Jews. And one of the main reasons why I talk about this is that there is a large population of what they would call crypto Jews that are coming into a Jewish identity in the Americas right now. and no one in the conscious or the urban apologist community is giving them grief or going at them for making such identifications or whatnot. So they don't go at people who look like my grandfather, but they go at people who look like Dante. And that's one of the main reasons why I talk about this as well, is to try to clarify that and make the arguments a bit more honest with the whole thing and whatnot. And shout out to people on the Christian side of things who do have honest conversations and whatnot. And with that, I'd like to shout out people like Abu. That is a good brother right there who has solid methodology and whatnot. And this is an area to where I think the good brother Damon Richardson should pay attention to what Abu has to say on the subject, because Abu is someone who's meticulous when it comes to methodology, and he shows a lot of respect for Yap Gang in the sense that we also try to do our best in dealing with methodology, etc. So the good brother Damon Richardson should pay attention here to what Abu has to say about this. Now, I must confess, Abu did not make this thumbnail here. I did, but however, I appropriated a thumbnail that Abu made for one of his videos where he talked about Dante's DNA. This is in fact the original that Abu made. But going further, Abu actually said this in a comment section of one of Baran's recent videos, discussing the video that I showed there, where he's talking about Dante's DNA. He says, "Yes, I have a couple of videos on Dante's paternal haplogroup. What did Abu Hammer say about Dante's Fortune's Y-DNA from the 14th of August 2021 and Dante Fortune's haplogroup from October 5th 2021? The second video is the more thorough of the two and overlaps with overlap with what Dante said in the clips shown in this show. In short, I think E1B1B, or more specifically a subclade thereof, is a plausible, even probable candidate for the biblical Jacob's haplogroup, and therefore I think Dante has a better chance of descending paternally from the biblical Jacob than most. More specifically, Dante's haplogroup EL29 is, as he said in the clips you showed, a subclade of EM34. And while this was not touched on in my videos, some serious geneticists believe EM34 originates in the Levant, and thus it is plausible that Dante is not merely related to residents of the ancient Levant. Rather, he might be a direct patrilineal descendant of a resident of the ancient Levant. If one would like to pursue a source proposing Levantine origin for EM34, Abu lists a good source to jump into right there. But yeah, Abu has publicly come out and said that he believes that if he had to choose between E and J in terms of like the original population of the Israelites, etc., whatnot, he would lean towards E. But he also leans towards something here, because this is why we agree on methodology and why I respect him so much, is he slows the conversation down and says this needs to be done on a case-by-case basis. He recognizes that E wasn't isolated to West Africa or to certain pockets of Africa, etc., and understands migration, etc. Again, Abu and I have something in common. His maternal grandfather has the same haplogroup that Dante has. Same exact EM84. My grandfather has EM34. He has the upward haplogroup of what they have, right? They have the downstream version of what he has, right? But same paternal ancestry, same Natufian ancestry, etc. Going further, shout out to the good brother Abu. I was laughing because I saw that Damon Richardson had made a play on the FBI, etc., whatnot, and I was laughing because those who know us and follow us and have been following us for a while know that we have a meme that we use to talk about the Catholic Israel Alliance, aka the CIA, because we've been called out for supposedly being agents because we have respect for people like Abu and are willing to work with them based upon his honesty and methodology. But shout out to Abu. Still waiting on my check out. Still waiting. But yeah, again, shout out to the good brother because he's all about methodology. You know what I'm saying? All about methodology. But again, why is Dante's DNA so important? Again, it's so important because it amplifies the fact that E was not isolated to West Africa, which was the common trope that Damon Richardson was saying to us, and it's something that we get from the conscious community as well. A lot of people assume there that E was isolated to West Africa. Not the case. And it's also important because it reminds us, like again, what Abu loves to say, like I like to slow it down, make it a case by case basis. Slow it down and make it a case by case basis. When we're talking about this Israelite concept, again, we don't make the claim that everyone that came off the slave ship was an Israelite. No, we don't make that claim. We make the claim that some do, and you got to make it a case by case basis based upon the lineage of people and who they go back to and what the tribes they go back to claimed about themselves, etc. And we also speak on this concept that DNA is going to be the best way, and this is Abu and I and the rest of the Yap gang agree on this concept that DNA is going to be the best way to trace lineage over millennia, over long periods of time, rather paternally or maternally. So in this case, Abu is making the case that, yeah, Dante could potentially paternally descend from someone who inhabited the Levant. His DNA shows such. Just like my grandfather's DNA shows such. Just like Abu's grandfather's DNA shows such. But here's the deal. So Abu's grandfather is a ginger. When a ginger Jew says that, you know what I'm saying, he has his DNA and he comes from Levant, nobody trips on that, right? My grandfather looks like he's North African, Mediterranean, whatnot, right? If people like him claim that he's got this DNA, he goes back to the Levant and he's a Jew. No one's tripping on that. But Dante looking like a West African with this DNA, claiming descendancy from that area, people are taking issue with that, and that we got to slow that one down. 100% slow that one down. And here's also another reason why we got to do it, right? Because and why DNA is a good way to parse out these claims. Because in America, for instance, we understand this narrative of a lot of African Americans claiming they have like Cherokee or Native American ancestry, whatnot, right? Well, you can make the claim, you can totally make the claim, but now we have ways to prove such, right? So, for instance, two members of YAP, myself and the good brother OG Sean Harris or whatnot, we have Native American mitochondrial DNA, right? So we can literally trace our migration pattern with that mitochondrial DNA and find out the people we came from with that mitochondrial DNA and where they originated from, right? That's one of the beautiful things about what you can do with DNA is when talking about migration patterns. Another thing you can do with DNA is you can do back migration patterns with the same thing. So there's an importance to Dante's DNA here because we have to now understand what migration what pattern did his migration take getting to West Africa
when dealing with direct ancestry.
100%. And so again, this is the parent clade to what Dante has in 123. Again, heavy in the Levant, heavy in Arabia, etc. Right, and there's a big pocket that people forget about in Ethiopia, etc. Huge pocket. We're going to see that here. We're going to see that here going forward and whatnot. Again, I wanted to show this because there's people in Somalia that have his exact haplogroup, EL29, right? There's people in again, modern day Arabia right now. It's heavy over there. But again, people got to understand why this is important, because when tracking this migration, how did it get there? And a lot of people don't understand the routes that go along the Sahel, etc. And the elevated level of Natufian DNA on the Sahel, etc. Versus other parts of Africa and whatnot. And forgetting that the Sahel is part of sub-Saharan West Africa. They forget that the Sahel is part of sub-Saharan West Africa. We'll get into that later on a whole different show and whatnot. For brevity, I'm just going to leave it right there. But again, this is one of the main reasons. So I was the person who told Dante he had E1B1B. I saw his show he did on it where he was showing this haplogroup. I was like, oh, you got my uncle's joint. I was like, okay, yeah. So I reached out to him and we were talking about the concept, and I talked about the concept of the fact that we know that the Lemba have E1B1B, but because of the level of STR tests that they took, we don't know what type of E1B1B they took, right? And Dante had let me look at his GED match and other things like that, and it really looked like to where Dante had an East African origin, to where he was dropped off in the middle of a West African population, either for a long period of time or like he was dropped off like and mixed with a group of slaves like that. Like he came from like an East African origin on a slave ship and was dropped off with a bunch of West Africans in the Americas and just had West Africans to mix with, right? And you can see this when if you look at his JED match, or if he shows a JED match, you'll see that he's less than 3% Natufian, even though he has a marker that is like basically a Natufian marker. He has a very high level of West African admixture, but you also see that he has a lot of touches of people that are along the Sahel. And it's very interesting and whatnot. But what's interesting about that is we have the Limba in Southeast Africa, etc., claiming to have a migration pattern that goes through Yemen, etc., where Dante's DNA is prevalent. The Limba have two migration stories, right? They have a migration story where they go to Southeast Africa. Then they have another migration story where they go into Africa, but people don't know where they go. But when you do the time periods we link up the time periods based upon the story and historical goings on at the time or whatnot, you can link it to a migration that goes into Mali, etc., via a whole bunch of Jews going in from Yemen, etc. And so left is a Mande man from Mali, and on the right is the man from is Cohen Hamadishe from Zimbabwe of the Limba and whatnot. Both of which could potentially have the same genetic makeup and whatnot, right? And if Dante's DNA forces us to have to test the Limba more to find out what type of E1B1B they have, and also more testing in West Africa, because the tribes in West Africa are huge, and we have very small sample sizes for their genetics and whatnot. So EM84 might be present in West Africa in places in Mali that we don't recognize because the tribes are so big. We're not testing all the sub clans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So his DNA forces us to have to slow down and really look at this type of thing. Because again, he doesn't have a high level of European admixture. And when you look at his DNA breakdowns, it's looking like this is coming from East Africa or Yemen, et cetera, in terms of the origin of his haplogroup. And again, I'll make this clear because there's multiple people in the Americas right now descending from the crypto Jews with the same haplogroups that Dante is connected to, and nobody's challenging their connection to Israel. Nobody, and nobody in the UA, and nobody in the UA challenges my connection to being Jewish based upon my connection to these people either. So there's got to be fair on all sides with this thing. Again, 25% of people in the Americas that are Hispanic or whatnot are connected to this Sephardic Maghreb DNA that people are finding came over early on in American populations and whatnot. And this turns out to be like 200 million people, fam. That's a large population in the Americas. That's a lot of people. But what's interesting about that is, again, that's my grandfather on the left, right? That's an Ethiopian Jew on the right. They both could have the same haplogroup, and the UA is not going to trip on that. But Dante, they're going to trip on. Again, this has got to get slowed down. Because we got people like Rabbi Harry Rosenberg, who's of Sephardic Jewish descent, who assimilated into the Ashkenazi Jewish population and whatnot. He's going around telling African Americans that 80% of them connect to the Igbo people, like the good brother Remy on the right, and they connect to Igbo Jewry at that, right? That's what he's going to tell them, right? And again, that's a whole, like, the UA is not going to Harry Rosenberg for telling people that, right? So when Dante's talking about this connection to the Igbo having like genetic connection to the Levant, this is exactly what was just explained in this video, because the Igbo genetics and Yoruba genetics are almost identical.
Shout out to E1B1 A1A1F1A and E1B1A7. Shout out.
I know that's right.
My Igbo family.
Yeah, so without further ado, fam, I'm gonna try to get into this real quick and just do a little picture show to show people who has what are the phenotypes of the people that have Dante's haplotype and haplogroup and whatnot, right? Just so we can get an understanding, and Damon Richardson can get an understanding of why he needs to slow down and look at Dante's genetics, and also why people like Abu are right to slow down with their methodology, etc. So Dante read this off. This is what you get from 23andMe, talking about the breakdown of EM123, EM34. For sake of brevity, I'm not going to read this. If y'all want to read this, you can pause the screen up and you can go through this yourself. you can definitely pause this part up. I'm going to touch on this real quick because today some of the highest concentrations of men bearing haplogroup EM123. Again, these are all related to EM34, EM84, etc. Right, and its diverse branches are found in East Africa, where they make up between 5 and 10% of men in parts of Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia. Like I was showing you earlier, there was a Somalian people with EL29, etc. Farther east, nearly 10% of men tested in Oman and 8% in Yemen carry the haplogroup. And to the north, they are found at low frequencies among Egyptians, Algerians, Tunisians, and others. The other great peak of men bearing EM123 is in the southern Levant. They are spread throughout the Middle East and in present-day Turkey, and at frequencies of about 5%, and make up about 13% of the male population in Jordan. Though generally rare in Europe, EM123 can be found among men along the Mediterranean Sea, and is at its most common in Sicily at 7% and Sardinia at 4%. Even at the far western edge, the lineage found in the Iberian Peninsula, especially among men from Portugal and the Spanish region of Galicia. It's talking about, it also goes on to say in 23andMe that the paternal haplogroup EM34 traces back to men who lived approximately 20,000 years ago, etc., etc., etc. I'm recommending that Dante should also use these DNA tests, Family Tree DNA and MyHeritage, because I noticed in his 23andMe it doesn't show a lot of North African or Middle Eastern connections or whatnot, and Family Tree is more sensitive to the North African, etc. Genetic readouts, etc. Also, family. So is MyHeritage as well in comparison to 23andMe. And both Family Tree and MyHeritage test for multiple different types of Jewish populations, not just Ashkenazi Jewish populations. They also test for Ethiopian and Maghrebi Jewish populations, and Sephardic populations, etc. So I would definitely suggest that Dante or anyone else interested in trying to find out the North African connection in a bit more detail versus from the 23andMe should also take these tests. And also, so this is what my uncle got back when he took the Family Tree DNA test, and what they said about him having Sephardic Maghrebi Jewish DNA, right? And I want to just read this top part here, and I'm going to skip through the rest of it for sake of brevity. From Africa, the first place people migrated was the Middle East. This area has played a crucial role in early human migration history. Ancient hunter-gatherers of the Middle East, known as Natufians, carry the most ancestry from this first group. Natufians might have spoken an early form of an Afro-Asiatic language and over time adopted farming from neighboring groups with whom they intermarried. So you heard Ibri give the breakdown, etc. We could talk about the Natufians all day, but it definitely seems obvious that Damon Richardson, either you have like a pre-Natufian understanding or a post-Natufian understanding of genetics, right? Is what it seems like to me in this apologetics game and whatnot. And it seems like Damon Richardson and a lot of people like in the urban apologetics community and also the conscious apologetics community, they have like a pre-Natufian concept, like this concept of like, again, E's isolated in West Africa, not understanding where E originates and whatnot, and the implications of the Natufians and how it affects the mutations, specific mutations of E1B1A and E1B1B. But yeah, going forward, like I said, I'm gonna skip through these right quick and just get to the picture show now. So we want to see who has these genetics, and where could these migration patterns have come from to where Dante could have gotten them in West Africa. Pardon me here. So right off rip, we see the Natufians are carriers of this haplogroup at a 40% clip, and we see them existing in Levant 11,000 to 15,000 years ago, etc. We see Jordanians, and these are actual Jordanians people. These are actual people of the land of Jordan. They carry this haplogroup at a clip of 31%. Again, I repeat, these are actual people of Jordan. The Amhara people of Ethiopia, they carry this, depending on which study you look at, a clip of 23.5% to 13.5%. And heavy in Ethiopia. We're going to find this out. Heavy in Ethiopia. Libyan Jews, looking like my grandfather and whatnot. North African, carrying this haplogroup with 17.4%.
Hey, I just got to give a shout out to L3 because it's in that region too.
No, that's
Shout out
right.
to L3.
Facts.
You know what I'm saying? I got to shout out my maternal DNA.
No doubt.
You know what I'm
No
saying?
doubt.
Yeah, I know that's right. You know, I will say this. I feel like L3 was like I think if we'll get into this early because we're gonna be talking about mitochondrial DNA, but I definitely think that L3 was you could definitely put it there in terms of like almost like the female version, like the Natufian joint, like how it spread and like where it went, who was mixing with and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, it's at the foundation of the Semitic people as well. I mean, it's 100%. Right there with DE is the maternal to DE.
Yes.
We're gonna have to do a mitochondrial presentation at some point. So I know Sister Shari would definitely jump in with that.
Who I believe is L3 herself.
Correct. We in that L3 family.
I know that's right. That's right. So going further, we got the Ethiopian Jewish brothers in Ethiopia who carry this haplogroup at a clip of 13.6%. We have the Sakhroi people. Now, these are people that you can see, like if you're in GEDmatch, you're going to see that this comes up on Dante'S stuff, this comes up on my stuff, and a lot of people's stuff, right? They carry this haplogroup. They carry my haplogroup of EM33 as well. These are people in Mauritania and whatnot. And I'll make the argument. I think Natufians don't look too dissimilar from my brother up here on the top. That's just me, right? And what's interesting is these people live in the Sahel and whatnot, and they have some of the highest Natufian DNA out of the people in sub-Saharan Africa, etc. We have the Kabyle Berbers of Algeria. They carry this haplogroup at a clip of 10.5%. We got Northern Egyptians that carry, depending on what study you look at, they carry this haplogroup at a clip of 10.2 to 4.8%. We have the Hazara of Afghanistan. They carry this DNA at a clip of 10.1%. But you're already seeing the genetic difference. You're seeing the phenotypical diversity of this, right? So we see the Sephardic Jews carry this, depending on what study you look at a clip of 10% to 5%. A lot of Jewish population. Ashkenazi Jews, depending, like again, 10%. A lot of Jewish populations carry this haplogroup. And again, a lot of people in Ethiopia that would like to carry this haplogroup in Ethiopia at a clip of 8.3%. Lots of Ethiopian people carry this, man. We got Yemeni people that carry this at a clip, depending on what study, at a clip from 8.1 to 7.4%. Again, the Oromo of Ethiopia, depending on what study you look at, they carry this haplogroup at a clip of 8% to 4.8%. Again, a lot of Ethiopia fan. The Turkish people, they carry this haplogroup, again, depending on what study you look at, from 8% to 2.2%. And again, Turkey is interesting because this is one of the places where like it starts to look like the mixed multitude concept, right? So you'll see people of like a darker hue, you'll see people of a lighter hue, etc., whatnot. And you'll see going forward, like when we go into like the Arab Emirates or whatnot, like you can really see like the concept of what the mixed multitude could have looked like coming out of Egypt or whatnot. We see the Omani people carry this again at a clip of 7.7%. There's a lot of Afro-Asiatic looking people here. Israeli Bedouins at 7.1%. You got Sicilians, depending on what study, 6.6 to 6.5%. The Kunama people, again, of Eritrea, right there next to Ethiopia, right? They carry this at a clip of 5%. 5%. Like here we go. I like this picture right here. The United Arab Emirates. They carried at a clip of 4.9%. And look at the phenotypical diversity there, right? This is again the United Arab Emirates, fan. And you got people looking like this, man. Like that could be me right there. You know what I'm saying? That could be a couple of people we know. That could be all kind of people in the app. You know what I'm saying? This is mad diverse. This is what the mixed multitude could have looked like in a lot of ways, man. And I'll just stop right there. You know what I'm saying? Because yeah, it's a problem, fam. It is a problem. How we doing on time? We are at an hour and a half on the dot.
Right on time. Right on time. Yeah. So anybody else? That's it. Anybody else ain't got anything to drop? We've pretty much done.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we good, man. I think we did a great job of pretty much addressing at least question number 2, the one we want to emphasize on, because again, we're not pushing the Khazar theory as far as Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews are concerned. We're not pushing that, but I think we did a great job of showing how it was direct Yoruba or Luya, which are Bantu people's ancestries, in that study, which I presented to Brother Damon. Also, that there's a strong connection between West Africans and the Near East, which Brother EV really did a good job of highlighting, and that there are African American people who have direct Ashkenazi, Sephardi ancestry, or North African Jewish ancestry, as the brother Orthodox Moore illustrated by pointing out the other brother's DNA. Me, myself, I have direct paternal Ashkenazi ancestry myself. So, I mean, African Americans are a diverse population, but we want to make sure that people don't leave out the fact that our ancestry goes back to the ancient Levant during the time of ancient Israel, so that when our people are out here saying that we are the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, people can realize we do have a valid claim that we can support with peer-reviewed studies like the brother asked for.
Right. Right. We don't want anybody trying to exclude us on a whole from world Jewry. We've provided enough evidence tonight, and we'll continue to. We've been doing this ad nauseum, like my brother Yeshua would say, ad nauseum on Genesis 49ers. It's been some years now, and nobody's really paying mind to it, but that's okay. Arguments like this, when people show out like this, like brother Damon, and come out and show out like this, where people are listening. Now people want to listen. Then we'll come back and we'll regurgitate this stuff again ad nauseum until everybody gets it. You cannot exclude us from world Jewry. You cannot.
Add my last 2 cents in. So just to establish everything, the first part of Damon's statement, we have no issue with that 2013 paper that you had, because we don't believe Jews are descendants of Khazars. We believe Jews are descendants of Levantine populations, are descendants of Israelites. And as for the second part of your statement, Jews have ancient West African DNA going back 3,400 years ago, prior to the Babylonian exile. The oldest Jewish populations to have West African DNA is the Iraqi and the Iranian Jews, basically Mizrahi Jews, Jews from Mesopotamia, Jews from Babylon, who are the oldest communities. But all 8 diverse Jewish populations have West African DNA. So that's one thing. And 2, West Central Africans do carry Bronze Age and Neolithic Levantine DNA, which would more than likely be Israelite. So, and also we established and even talked about old E1B1A being found in Africa and people like Ramses III, but we don't see it in West Africa 3,000 years ago. Damon, what you have to illustrate is E1B1A being in Western and Central Africa 3,000 years ago, but we don't see that. What we see is haplogroup A and B, which is not E1B1A people, completely different haplogroup. Oldest West Central African people are hunter-gatherers, pygmies, and Khoisan groups. So yeah.
And I'll say this to close it out for me. So the invitation has been laid out for you by Yeshua to come on Genesis 49ers in the Source Debate League to have a conversation over there. I have access to Debate Talk for you. I'm also rolling out that red carpet for you, brother man. We can have a good productive dialogue on that channel if you'd like as well. People like Vocab Malone and other Christians like Elder Mike, many other Christians have come on that channel with me and had multiple dialogues very peacefully, respectfully, etc. If you want to debate, we can also set that up with someone on either debate league with or debate channel with someone from the Yak Game, etc. But if you want to dialogue on Berean TV, we're down to go over there and dialogue. No issue. But we should be able to have respectful and open dialogue towards
dialogue. Exactly.
We can clear up any potential mistakes. You know what I'm saying? Like we can all make mistakes in this thing, fam. It's not a big deal. And we can definitely just clear up the information going forward and have respectful dialogue. Fam.
Facts. So, family, there you have it. Another Japanese hibachi meal cooked up for y'all. I hope you guys got your full. I want to give out to my bro Dante too, because he did a pretty decent job, for a layman. So I want to say that on record. We at Yap Gang, we stayed quiet for a minute. We seen the rumblings, we heard the noise, but we wanted to see who was going to step up and try to at least push back on Damon's presentation. And there was some people in Yap Gang with some itchy trigger fingers ready to blow immediately. But we had a discussion and we said we're going to wait. We wanted to wait to see who in our community, in the Israelite community, would come out and challenge him first. And the people that we thought that should have came out, and most of y'all thought should have came out, and no disrespect to either one of those brothers, but Benaiah, I should say Benaiah, Israel. I didn't hear nothing from the brother. And Ron Dalton. But Ron Dalton right now, he's soaring in the clouds, with all the publicity he's getting right now. So he's probably not even studying anything that's going on over here. All right. But again, nobody answered. But Dante did. Dante stepped up. He started reading, like I said, for a layman, I think that he did a pretty decent job. So shout out to bro Dante. All right. So with that, fam, we're going to close this show out. Again, thank you for attending the premiere of the Yap Gang Scholarship channel, another franchise of the Yap Gang channels that we have. And I say to you, shalom. Yeah.
Bible to the Quran, Revelation in Jerusalem, Shalom, Salam Alaikum. You can see Christian, Jews and Muslims living together and praying, Amen. Let's give thanks and praises. Baruch Ata Adonai, Baruch Abba Yerushalayim, Baruch Ata Adonai, Baruch Abba Yerushalayim. Jerusalem, here I am. Jerusalem, je t'aime. Jerusalem.